Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Wilson Stribling. Welcome to another edition of At Issue, where we discuss and debate the issues facing the state of Mississippi and how these issues impact you. At Issue tonight, who's running? Statewide elections are 2 years away and congressional races are right around the corner. Some candidates have announced bids for re-election. Others have not officially revealed their intentions but appear to be stepping forward. MPB's political analysts, Republican Austin Barber and Democrat Brandon Jones, will join us in a moment to share their insight. But first, let's take a look at what offices Mississippians will be voting for. In the U.S. House of Representatives, seats held by Democrat Benny Thompson and Republicans Greg Harper, Stephen Palazzo, and Trent Kelly will be up for election in 2018. A Senate seat will also be up for grabs next year, the one currently held by the state's junior senator, Republican Roger Wicker. He is a declared candidate for re-election as he seeks his third term in the Senate. The seat held by Republican Senator Thad Cochran is up for re-election in 2020. He is currently serving his seventh term and has not announced what he plans to do when it is up. On the state level, all 8 of Mississippi's statewide elected offices will be on the ballot in 2019, including governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and secretary of state. Since Governor Phil Bryant is limited to 2 terms, he will not be running again. Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves, attorney general Jim Hood, and secretary of state Delbert Hosemann are all expected to seek office again, but what they will run for is still unclear. Reeves and Hood are currently the most frequently mentioned likely candidates for governor. MPB's Mark Rigsby spoke with both men at the Neshoba County Fair this summer. Hood blasted Republicans, Reeves blasted Democrats, and called out Hood specifically.
Okay, you were really beating up Jim during your speech today. Are you trying to get some really good shots in, at least in front of the public, so before you actually announce your run for governor?
Look, I just think it's important for Mississippians to know that there is a huge difference between what Republicans believe in and what Democrats believe in. There's a huge difference in the party that is led by President Donald Trump and the party that is led by Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. Mississippians that run for statewide office in our state as Democrats try to make people forget that. They try not to talk about issues that matter to Mississippians. They want to talk about other things because they know they're wrong. Democrats are wrong on so many issues as it relates to the vast majority of Mississippians, and I just think it's important that the people of our state recognize that and have an opportunity to hear what those differences are. A prime example is I believe that the fact that we passed the largest tax cut in Mississippi history is a good thing. Democrats believe we ought not enact those tax cuts. They believe that truck drivers and realtors and our pastors don't deserve a tax break. I believe that people know better how to spend their money than the government ever will know how to spend their money. And so there are some very stark differences between what Republicans and Democrats believe, and I thought it was important to take this opportunity here at the fair and talk about that.
Where are you right now in trying to get your team together to make that run for governor?
Look, I've been very fortunate to be elected in Mississippi on 4 different occasions, and on each of those occasions, at least the last couple times, we've gotten well over 60% statewide, and that's something that I'm proud of. We haven't taken any decisive action in terms of hiring staff or anything along those lines, and won't even consider that for a while now. I mean, look, there's 19 months till the qualifying deadline. We're about 2 years out from the primary. In fact, 2 years and about a week, we'll have a Republican primary for governor. And in November, 2 years and 3 months, we'll have a general election. So there's a lot of time for things like that to happen. But we're really focused right now on implementing policies that help Mississippi improve our environment for job creation and help improve the educational attainment level of Mississippians. If we'll focus on that, all these other political things will work out.
Do you think he's taking personal shots at you because the Republicans believe that you were the strongest Democratic potential contender for the governor's office?
I don't know. You'll have to ask him that. You know, I try to get up here and state what I think the facts are, and that's not personal. You know, but you know, I've had tons of Republicans encourage me to run for governor, and that tells me something. It tells me people vote for who they like, and you know, so I try not to make it personal, be personally critical of people. But you know, I know what the facts are. I read what y'all write, what y'all put on, and then media. You know, and then I go look and do the research, and it's simple. It's just facts.
So you say you're thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
Where are we right now in the process with you? Because as you know, as we've seen, at least in the last presidential cycle, some people actually jump in years in advance so that they can get their name out there and they can drum up more support.
I'm doing what I got to do. I'm going around the state, speaking, raising money, doing those kind of things I got to do to get ready. But till Debbie, my wife, says, she's going to have to say, I will never say, that we shouldn't have done this. I just said, I got to hear those words from you. Or either, I've had a great career. I've got 28, 30 years in with the state. I served as a DA and assistant AG. But anyway, that's a call my wife's got to make, and the good Lord, maybe I'll still be living in 2 years. And, things change, so we'll see.
Is there an option you run for AG again?
Yeah, it is. I don't, but I go by these poor people that live just right down the road from me. It's a couple, they don't have any air conditioning. They sit out on the porch, I don't know if they're disabled or what. They're a white couple, and then the other direction, I see the poverty in our state. And I see the least among us. And these people get elected, on religion, talking about religion, and they thump the Bible. They don't read what's in the New Testament. And in there, Jesus talked about taking care of the widows and the orphans and the elderly a whole lot more than he talked about all these other social issues combined that people want to get out here and try to get elected on. So those are things that concern me. Those are things that concern my wife. And the direction we're headed, we're not taking care of the least among us.
Let's get straight to the point now with views from both sides of the aisle. Brandon Jones is a Democrat. He's an attorney with the Beria Jones law firm and a former member of the House. Austin Barber is a Republican national strategist. He's the founding partner of the Clearwater Group. Austin, Brandon, good to have you both back on At Issue.
Thank you.
We're talking about the upcoming elections. Let's start chronologically. We've got big elections coming up in 2018, 2019, and 2020. First, 2018, Roger Wicker's seat in the Senate is up for re-election, and all our House seats, they're all but one held by Republicans. Austin, do you think that's going to remain the case?
Yes, I do think that will remain the case. I think obviously in 2018 the first domino is there. I don't think there's anything odd of the way that it may fall. I think Roger Wicker is looking probably for a pretty easy re-election campaign next year. As of now, there are no announced serious candidates to run against him. I think the only person who's made any noise is the state senator from Ellisville, Chris McDaniel. And
the one who gave Thad Cochran a run for his money in the primary last time.
A big run, yeah. He was the leader after the primary, and of course lost after a very serious runoff.
You don't think he'll try to parlay that into a run against Roger Wicker?
I don't think anybody really knows what Chris is going to do except for Chris. But I think if I was a betting man, I'd probably would say he would not end up running for the U.S. Senate in 2018 against Roger Wicker, because Roger Wicker is a different candidate than Thad Cochran was in 2014. Roger Wicker has over $3 million in the bank, amazing name ID throughout the state, very favorable, very conservative. And, he came off a big election in 2008, which I ran for him in 2008, where he beat Ronnie Musgrove in a big year for Democrats. Of course, Barack Obama was elected president. So just a different kind of campaign. And we'll see what Senator McDaniel does. But I think at the end of the day, I don't think he'll get in this race. But you never know with Chris.
Yeah, there's plenty to run on as a Democrat. There's plenty to be critical of these Republicans who are representing Mississippi on. And I think that's true both of Senator Wicker and of our state congressman. But Austin is correct. The lay of the land right now is just pretty dicey for Democrats, particularly for federal office. I don't think that Congressman Thompson will be challenged all that heavily in the 2nd District. But outside of that, it's tough. And, policy aside, I have to be, you have to give credit where it's due. The Republicans in District 1 and 4 have done a pretty good job of taking marginally competitive seats and making them less so.
Yeah.
I don't think, frankly, that that's tied to performance so much as it is just the political current of the moment. But this is a place that Donald Trump won pretty overwhelmingly last November, and you have to be honest about that. Now, if there was going to be a serious Democrat to run, I would be looking at the Senate seat, because I know that is going to be a place, given some of the Senate's actions over the course of the last month or so, given some of the more unpopular votes that we suspect they will have to cast between now and 2018, I think there's going to be some opportunities there. So if you see a Democrat stick their neck out, I think the most serious candidates are more likely to be in that Senate race than in the House race.
But you don't know of any such people at this point?
Well, I think that it's discussed a lot. I mean, frankly, my law partner is approached on a pretty much a monthly basis to at least consider it. David Berria, the leader of the minority in the House. I think that some of these folks who we may talk about for these 2019 state races could be potentially taking that into consideration. But having said all that, very tough slog for Democrats.
Yeah, and I think it's a Berria type of candidate for the Democrat Party. He's the only way that they could be competitive. I don't think he can win in 2018. I think with Berria is you have a guy who could self-fund to a certain degree. The Democrats' biggest problem as they have to make decisions from a state apparatus from 18 to 19 is there's only so much money, okay? And we want to win the governor's race. We want to win some other races. We want to try to take back the House, which I know we'll talk about. But there's only so much money to do that. So we really can't go pour a bunch of money into a U.S. Senate race 12 months, 6 months before that. So you've got to have somebody who's a Democrat who says, I've got $1 million of my own money to put into this, and who could rally the African-American base and peel off a sort of kind of white moderate voters from Roger Wicker, and that is threading the needle in a major way.
All right, let's move on to the statewide elected offices, all of them up for grabs in 2019, governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and on down. Will the Democrats put up a strong candidate this year?
I think we will, and I think it has the potential to be one of the strongest slates that we've had in many, many cycles. And look, I was the person who was here talking about that potential slate in 2015, so I'm acutely aware of how wrong you can be when you talk about who's going to be the candidate in the future.
Slate.
With all respect to Mr. Gray, I don't think I saw him coming. But we have a chance now to see Jim Hood, who is a wildly popular public official in Mississippi, at the top of the ticket. And you know, it's hard to put proper perspective on this, but he would come with the type of immediate credibility that we just simply have not had in several cycles. And I think he could potentially even open up at a lead in a poll against another Republican. He's had enormous success. There were moments there during Governor Barber's administration and during his elections, and he was, of course, a popular governor, where Jim Hood got more votes than Governor Barber did. So you're talking about someone who has been successful at attracting Republican voters. He's been successful at attracting independent voters. And so Jim Hood could be a real difference maker for Democrats at the top of the ticket. I think that you could very likely see Representative Jay Hughes run at lieutenant governor. And Jay has been a bit of a firebrand. He has been very vocal about issues that have come through the legislature. But that might be precisely what this moment calls for. We've seen it work at different levels of government. I know that Jay has been approached by people from across the state asking him to run. I know that he's thinking about that seriously. I would not be surprised to see him on the ballot. And the two of them could make a pretty formidable top of the ticket for Democrats.
Against which two Republicans?
Well, I think when you look at Jim Hood, and I'll answer that one second, he is the best candidate the Democrats have. He is a very serious candidate, and this is not a backhanded compliment for him, but he has raised money from trial lawyers all throughout the country and has that ability. He has the ability to go raise a bunch of money because there are a lot of trial lawyers from around the country who would write him really big checks, and you got to have money to be able to run and win successfully. Tate Reeves is no question going to be, in my opinion, the nominee for governor. I think Delbert Hosemann, in no question, is going to be the nominee for lieutenant governor. Both of them are very well known, very well liked, particularly in the Republican Party. I think even if you polled them with all voters, they're going to have pretty decent favorable numbers. An important session for Tate next year and in 19. Need to have some good momentum, get the infrastructure issue behind you. But look, I think there's no doubt those are the two guys who will represent the Republican Party for governor as well as for lieutenant governor, and can raise a good amount of money as well.
We're talking about some dominoes here as well, because if Jim Hood were to run for governor, he could not run for attorney general. So who do you like for attorney general on the Democratic side?
We've got a few people who I think should look carefully at that. Scott Colomb is a very talented district attorney in North Mississippi, recently elected with prosecutorial experience. He led, as an example, he led a little segment at the Mississippi Bar a couple weeks ago that I sat in on, and I was very impressed by his command of the issues and by his understanding of what people face when they're doing prosecution at that level. He certainly has the talent to be successful in that role. There are other district attorneys across the state who could potentially look at that. I think that when you talk about down ticket spots for the Democratic Party, we'll look to people like Public Service Commissioner Brandon Presley, who has enormous appeal in the Northern District, has probably one of the best retail approaches to politics in Mississippi, and could be a very formidable candidate. And then again, you look at some of these other legislative leaders. Sonia Williams-Barnes on the Gulf Coast has made herself a formidable policy leader. David Blunt, a good friend of mine and somebody who represents part of Jackson here, I have always thought could do just about any job in government well. I'll always be there to encourage him to at least look at it. But one thing that we didn't mention, I don't want to get too far off the segment, I hope that the Republican Party and their path to secure some of these nominations has a little bit more excitement than what we saw last time around. And I think there's a possibility of that. With the success that they've had at the ballot box comes a little bit of infighting that Democrats dealt with for years and years and years. It would not surprise me if either Tate, Delbert, or both faced formidable opposition in the primary. I would not be surprised if one of our Supreme Court justices didn't run. I think that Justice Randolph and Justice Waller have both thought long and hard about running for office outside of the Supreme Court for some time. I would suspect that both would run as Republicans. If that were to happen, it could create a very interesting dynamic in that primary.
But I think, as you talk about the Attorney General from the Republican side, a lot of people talk about Lynn Fitch, who of course is the current state treasurer. I think she's got some interest in that. I think a dark horse candidate could be State Senator Briggs Hobson from Vicksburg, who is, I believe, is the chairman of the Mississippi, or the president,
outgoing president of the Mississippi Bar.
So that's instant credibility. Mike Hurst, who just who ran last time, ran a very good campaign. Who of course just got appointed as Southern District U.S. Attorney by President Trump. I don't know that he could transition from that to a AG race. Maybe he could, maybe he couldn't, but you certainly got to have him on any list. I think those are probably the three most serious candidates for Attorney General. And it's interesting you talk about Brandon Presley, that you don't have him as sort of the lead dog for Lieutenant Governor for the Democrat side, because obviously he is a very good retail politician, struggles to raise money, very much a populist, much like Jim Hood. I think would be a strong candidate. But it's good that you have options.
Well, I would let Commissioner Presley speak for himself on this, but I hope that what you're hearing is a step towards a little bit more sophisticated approach. And I think that what I hope you will see in 2019, no matter who ultimately ends up on the ballot, is that as a party, we will be discussing these things better internally, talking amongst ourselves, and really, I think one of the things that Democrats have that Republicans don't have is, frankly, there are times when it feels like you could cram us all into a phone book, where we do sometimes here in the last several cycles. We've took some punches on the jaw electorally. But there is a closeness there. There is good communication across this bunch. Everybody who I just mentioned has the other one's cell phone number. There is talk. We do share a policy vision. These various diverse audiences that you want to bring to bear on a statewide election, I think they are talking to one another. And so I hope that what you see is some coordination. And I think that Commissioner Presley, so long as those other two run, is happy to allow them to.
Look, and I led off by saying, here's who, in my opinion, will be the Republican nominee for governor and lieutenant governor. Of course, Tate Reeves for governor and Delbert Hosemann for lieutenant governor. Does that mean they won't have a serious primary? No, that is not what I'm saying. Does that mean that Mike Randolph or Bill Waller or Chris McDaniel or some legislator or Lynn Fitch or you name it decides I'm going to step up and run for one of those seats? Absolutely not. I do think that there is a real chance that we could have primaries. I just think at the end of the day, between Delbert and Tate, they are tough guys to beat in a primary. They're tough guys to beat in a general election. And as you know, because you've been around politics and campaigns a long time, sometimes a tough primary is a good thing to get you ready for a really tough general election.
What about House Speaker Philip Gunn? He's been sitting at the top of the hill for a little while now. He hasn't figured into the conversation just yet.
He is not. I think he's done a really good job as Speaker of the House. I don't know what his plans are. I would hate to even speculate what his plans are. There are some thoughts out there that maybe he has his eyes. I guess there I am speculating when I said I wouldn't do it. But I think there's some thoughts that maybe he may want to go take a shot at the U.S. Senate. Senator Cochran, of course, is I'm not going to make any announcements because I don't know, but his seat is up in 2020. I think most people think that Senator Cochran will not seek re-election. We'll let him make that final decision, and his family, of course. But I think if you're Philip Gunn, that may be what you're looking for is 2020 because it's just right down the road.
We'll talk more about 2020 here in just a moment. But what about Governor Bryant? After he's finished being governor, what do you see him doing?
Listen, Phil Bryant has been a great someone who's given back to the state in a tremendous way his whole adult career, okay? As auditor, as lieutenant governor, as governor, even before that in the law enforcement world. If I was him, I'd go try to make some money. I think that's only the fair thing to do is for this guy who's, have the opportunity to use some of the relationships that he has and, go give some speeches, go work on some different deals like a lot of governors or senators when they retire have that opportunity to go do so. And I hope if he has that opportunity that he does that because it's very, very well deserved for him and his family because certainly they've given a lot to the state, whether you agree with him or not.
I feel like I'm in the throes of some type of fever dream. We've got Donald Trump in the White House, maybe Philip Gunn or maybe Phil Bryant in the Senate. We've got to get our act together as a party because when you hear those names and you look at their track record, this state needs better. And so the Democratic Party, it's incumbent not only on the folks who they think they know something about politics, people like me, these stuffed shirt talking heads. We need people who actually care about this state to get engaged and to vote, put some candidates out there. Because as I hear this list, I'm thinking, haven't we tried this? I mean, we've given this bunch that we just mentioned a pretty good decade of leadership, and I'm not so sure Mississippi is better off from it. And the Democratic Party bears some responsibility if we can't put candidates up against these folks to challenge them for these important offices.
It's an important 30 month versus 36 because of when primaries start and general elections end, but it is a very important 30-month period from 18 to 19 to 20 in terms of how Mississippi's going to be moved forward in terms of our state leadership, both in Washington and in Jackson.
All right, let's move to 2020 quickly. We mentioned Thad Cochran, and let's assume that Thad Cochran's not running for re-election. Then who emerges at that point?
Well, it's 3 years away, and so we have to be fair with each other and with our viewers that that's a lot of time.
Sure.
And we could have names that haven't even crossed people's mind yet come to play. And so with that caveat, I think it'll be a pretty wide open field. And we know that seat is highly coveted. One of the things that comes with Republican success is this sense that, when you win that many races, everybody feels like they ought to be in the U.S. Senate.
Absolutely.
There's a subcommittee chairman over in the Senate right now who, nobody knows outside of his family, and he feels like he ought to be at the United States Senate. Yeah. So that's going to create some interest. Now, I would be shocked if that primary in particular was not crowded out with Republicans. I mean, it's going to be a pretty busy primary, I would assume. And again, back to what we talked about with Democrats, it's not one of leadership or candidates. We've got some folks who could give good runs, but to get to the point where you could credibly raise the money and build the type of operation to do that, I think a lot of that will kind of hinge on how 19 goes and what kind of momentum we can come out of that year with.
I'm going to use Sam Britton. Sam's a friend. He's a guy that I've known for a little while. He was the Public Service Commissioner for South Mississippi. If you're Sam Britton and you're thinking, I really enjoy my job, maybe I run again for re-election in 2019, but maybe I'm thinking about doing something different. And in his definition of doing something different, maybe I want to run for Congress. well, I'm not going to run for Congress in 18 because that's before my 19 election, and there's this guy named Stephen Palazzo who's already in Congress. But if Stephen Palazzo, we're speculating, that's the purpose of this show, decides to run for the U.S. Senate in 2020 if there's an open seat, because Senator Cochran retired, well, then there's an open seat for Congress. So you really have to, if you're a committee chairman in the Senate or the House, a businessman, a Republican statewide elected official, or regional elected official, MDOT or PSC, you really have to see how are the dominoes going to fall in order for me to make the most important decision for my family. If I'm one of these individuals, I use Sam as an example because maybe he's someone who's thinking about doing something else, but there's some other dominoes that need to fall before he can make that final decision. So there could be a lot of open seats. Obviously, if you look at 2020, I think would be remiss if we didn't mention, Greg Harper would probably be the front runner, the congressman from this district, the biggest media market, probably has raised the most money. Stephen Palazzo, Congressman Kelly, I mean, those three sitting congressmen all would have a great opportunity to run a very serious campaign. And then do you have some statewide elected officials who may say, I want to go get in it? I feel like I can win this. Businessmen, we'll just have to see. A lot of people.
Important individual decisions that ultimately will affect the future of our state and our country as well. Austin, Brandon, thank you both.
Thank you.
We are out of time. Don't forget, you can check out the program on our website, mpbonline.org/issue. And join us again next Friday night here on MPB for another edition of At Issue. Good night.